Hey everyone, welcome to week 3 of the fall 2024 men's study through Disciplines of a Godly Man. We're excited for you to join us. Today we're going to be talking about the discipline of marriage, and Dr. Hughes goes right to the best text that we have for marriage in the New Testament. That's Ephesians chapter 5, where it talks about the expectations and requirements of both the husband and the wife. And we're obviously going to focus on those requirements for the husband today. And so I want to start by reading to you Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31. And it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." Now it's interesting that it starts with the man there. It doesn't start with the woman. It says, "A man shall leave his father and mother." Other places it says, "A man shall leave his mother and father." So it doesn't really matter. Some people make a big issue out of that. That's really not a big issue. But the fact is, it's talking to the man. The man leaves his mother and father and he cleaves to his wife. And there's this union that God brings together. And that cleaving literally means to turn one's back on and to walk towards something else. And so you're gonna cleave toward your wife, and that's a bond that isn't replicated anywhere else in any other kind of relationship besides just the marriage relationship. And so we are called to do that. And there is this outstanding unity in marriage. The unity that a husband and wife can have is unsurpassed by anything else. And so that's the goal we're really setting for these marriages, that we have marriages that not only survive, but they thrive. And that's going to happen because there's unity. The two become one. They cleave to one another. And, marriage produces two people who are as much the same person as two people can possibly be. And so for that to happen, the marriage, the discipline of marriage takes sacrificial love, sanctifying love, and self-love. And so we're going to talk about that. That's what Dr. Hughes went over in the chapter. I'm going to briefly go over it, and then you guys are going to talk about it in your small groups. I hope you have read the chapter. It really, really helps, and it's a good chapter. But it says this, starts out with sacrificial love. And Ephesians 5:25 says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." It's a call to radical sacrificial love. That's what marriage requires, and that's what marriages thrive off of, that radical sacrificial love. So what does that sacrificial love look like? Well, first of all, Dr. Hughes talks about how marriage is called a call to death, a call to die to ourselves. And a man who does not die to himself for his wife does not come close to the love from what he's called. And so think about that for just a second. We are called to die to ourselves. And now it's not a physical death, but it could be a death to our desires. It could be a death to our calendar. It could be a death just to even our own selfishness. But for us to have that radical sacrificial love, we need to make sure that we're willing to die so that we can love our wife the best possible way. And marriage vows, if you think back to your vows, for some of us, that's a long time ago, but our vows are a lifelong practice of death, a lifelong practice of death. And you think about it, to have and to hold till death do us part, okay? And sickness and health, and rich and poverty, all those things are death. And so those who die for their wives know the most joy and have the most fulfilling marriages. And I think that's true. I mean, I've experienced that in my marriage relationship. It's so true. And so really want to encourage you guys to learn how to die. And what I'm talking about is, it doesn't mean you give up your whole life. It just means that you become sacrificial and you're willing to put things to the side. You're willing to give up things for the benefit of the relationship. And that may be difficult, especially if you've been married for a long time and you're, in that rut and routine of doing your marriage, and you kind of have a certain rhythm about how you do things. Yeah, it's going to be a difficult thing to die to that marriage, but you have to really to work on it. Another aspect of sacrificial love, Dr. Hughes uses intercession. And I like that because it's giving ourselves for our bride. And it involves that standing in the gap between us and between her and God. And we literally, you intercede, which means you go to God on your wife's behalf. And why is that important? Well, because nobody should know your wife better than you. And so you lift up your wife's needs. You lift up everything that they're going through. You lift up and you just pray for them and you intercede on their behalf before God. And so that begs the question: do you pray for your wife on a regular daily basis? And I mean, I know I fall short of that. But she's when I have my prayer list, and she's always on that prayer list, and I'm always praying for certain things. And so you ought to have a list of your wife's needs, which you can hold up to God. Okay, whether you keep it in your phone, whether you keep it on paper somewhere. I wouldn't trust your mental list just because how forgetful we are. But prayer is the hard work of a husband. It's the marital work of a husband. And so you should be the one praying for your wife, because you may be the only one who is. And so I just want to challenge you guys to that sacrificial love. Learn how to die to things and learn how to intercede for your wife. Another aspect of the discipline of marriage is a sanctifying love. And this is where Ephesians 5 gets really, really good. But marriage should be a mutually satisfying relationship. Okay? And what I mean by that is that marriage should move us towards holiness, not away from it. And marriage reveals, it reveals the amount of selfishness we have. I think Dr. Hughes says it reveals rooms of selfishness, and I didn't realize how selfish I was until I got married, and it becomes evident, and my wife points it out, and 90% of the time it was true, and we are men by nature are selfish beings. And we think of, not so much we think of ourselves, but we just think of what we want to think of. We think of what we want to do, and we often don't consider other people. And so marriage reveals that selfishness. But as Dr. Hughes says, marriage is the only institution that can tame the barbarian in the man. And that's how God has equipped women to do. I've seen the toughest of men, humbled and rendered to a low position by just a simple look from their wives. They're manly men. They're tough men, and all of a sudden their wife shoots them a look across the room, and they're just like, they know they're in trouble. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that, honestly, because it keeps us in check. And so, but there is a responsibility on the husband's part to sanctify their wife. If you have your Bibles open to Ephesians chapter 5, I want you to look at verse 26 and 27. It says, we read, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. But then it continues, and it says that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word. And so we see that, and then it says, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. And so the husband sanctifies his wife by washing her with the water of the word. That means that you fill yourself with the word of God, and then you share that with your wife. Okay, and you use it to instruct, you use it to guide, you use it to mold and to shape. And so we should be sanctifying our wives. And so that means you need to be a man of the word who lives a godly life, praying for and sanctifying his wife. Okay. Now, Dr. Hughes says something interesting, because oftentimes as husbands, like, oh, my wife is a saint. And yeah, because they're married to you, they have special saint status. But Dr. Hughes challenges us to look at our wives as sinners. That means that don't go home and call your wife a sinner. Pastor Chuck says, I got to look at you as a sinner. So that's not going to go well. Okay. And so I just want to encourage you. You just look at your wife as a sinner, because we are all sinners. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. And so we have to realize that they're apt to sin just as much as we are. And we have to encourage them towards godliness. Now, questions that you want to ask yourself in this sanctifying love Is my wife more like Christ because she is married to me? That's convicting. That's convicting, because our tendency is to pull our wives away from Christ. Our tendency is to pull our wives away for to take care of our needs, and that's oftentimes that could be away from God. And so my challenge to you is that you look at it as like, okay, my job is to make my wife more like Christ, and that's done through my words, that's done through my actions, and so we need to do that. The next question you want to ask yourself is, do I sanctify her, or do I hold her back? Now, remember, the word sanctify means to set apart and to transform. When we go through the sanctification of process, with Christ, He plucks us out of sin, out of death, and He puts us into life. But then He continues that process. Philippians 1:6 says, "He who began a good work will complete it till the end of days." I love that verse, which means the fact is He began the work through salvation. Now He's completing it through sanctification. And so are we sanctifying our wives? Or are we holding her back? And then the final question is she a better woman because she is married to me? That's a challenge. That's a challenge right there. And so the third area of love that we're going to look at is self-love. And if you look at Ephesians 5 again, verse 28, it says this: "In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one has ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body." So now we get to the self-love. Now, this isn't what a popular form of love today is. It's like you'll hear a lot of people say, you can't possibly love anybody else unless you love yourself first. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, once sin entered into man with Adam and Eve in the garden, man, we became experts in self-love. It is innate in us. We don't have to do anything. And all of us are grown men. And so we have, on average, 20 years of experience of loving ourselves. So we don't have to love ourselves so we can love our wives. That's not what it's talking about. What it's talking about is the fact is that we have this level of self-love for ourselves, and we need to elevate that love for our wife to at least the same level, but striving to even get above that. And so, of course, that takes the dying, that takes the interceding, that takes the sanctifying, all that kind of stuff, where it lowers us and it elevates our wife. And so we want to sanctify her. When we want to love her with the same love that we have for ourselves. Okay. And so we have to raise that level. We do that. I like how Dr. Hughes says that. We do that through comfort, adornment, and care. So comfort, when our wife isn't doing well, when our wife is full of fear, we have to comfort them. Well, at the same time, we have to adorn them. You think about this, you go to the mall and there's all these jewelry stores and they're trying to sell you jewelry that'll make her look beautiful on the outside, and that's important. But her beauty on the inside is way more important. That comes by us, cherishing her. That comes by us just loving her with our words and letting her know how valuable they are and how appreciated she is. That's adornment right there. That fills the tank. In marriage, I always talk about marriage. Marriage is like a bank account. When we're dating, when we're wooing her, before we get engaged, it's like we're putting all of these deposits into the account. We're taking them on dates. We're giving them flowers. We're talking nice things. We'll talk to them on the phone for hours, all that kind of stuff. And it seems like right after we say I do, we stop putting deposits in there and we start taking withdrawals. And that's why, like, after 5 years, you see these marriages that are bankrupt, because the fact is all they've been doing is withdrawing, and they do nothing to deposit. And so adornment is like depositing. You deposit. You do that by loving your wife, by complimenting your wife, by serving your wife. And so you got to make sure, and you take an assessment right now on your marriage. Is that where is that bank account at? Is it close to non-sufficient funds, or is there a healthy account there? So I want to encourage you guys to do that. And then finally, care. Care is doing something without her prompting. You care for her. And it's not just bringing home a paycheck. It's not even just taking care of things around the house. It's like you literally care about what's on her heart and what's on her mind. And so I want to challenge you guys to do that. And so We need to devote the same time and energy and creativity to our wives as we do ourselves. Okay. Now, one thing that could go bad is that when we belittle our wives, when we put them down, it's like we're tearing them down, and our job is to build them up. And so I want to challenge you guys to do that. All right. Then he looks at several things after these three areas of love that will kind of help with the discipline. And the first he talks about is fidelity. Not fidelity. I'm sorry, commitment. That's commitment is the first one, and that's that means that you mean your vows, but not only you mean your vows, you stick to your vows. You're committed to her. You're committed to the relationship. You're committed to the family. You sacrifice your time. You sacrifice your resources. You sacrifice, your emotional bandwidth for your family because they're the most important ones. And so you need to have that commitment. And when you mean your vows, till death do us part, you're going to stick with her until death separates the two of you. Then you want fidelity. So next to the commitment of the discipline. Next to the discipline of commitment is the discipline of fidelity, and that means being sexually pure. That means you have eyes for only one woman, and that you love them in that way. And then the final way that I want to challenge you. There's other ways in the book, and I'm going to have you guys look at those at yourself. But the final way that I want to challenge you guys this evening is the fact that you need to communicate with your wife. I know the joke goes that women have 25,000 words a day and men only have 12, and that can be true. But you know what? That doesn't excuse you from the responsibility of communicating your wife. You need to take the time because they need to understand, they need to know, they need to process things more than we do as men. And so don't despise your wife's verbal processing. If she needs to know something, spend the time and be patient enough to explain it to her. So if you take these steps of sacrificial love, sanctifying love, and self-love, and you add onto them the disciplines of commitment, fidelity, and communication, I can guarantee you will see your marriage begin to grow and to thrive. So, all right. God bless you as you guys go to your small groups, and I'll see you next week.